Good morning, everyone, and then welcome back. The last time we started with literature review, which is chapter 2 of research methods. Today we will continue from we are looking at the components of literature review. So what goes into literature review, or how are you going to arrange your literature? For thesis, you have to first give an introduction to the literature review. So as you've seen the components, you should have an introduction, and then after that you should organize the literature based on your objectives, right? So it's expected that if you have 4 objectives, you should have 4 subheadings for your literature, and then you should go ahead and then write the literature, right? So let's look at what goes into the introduction. And then most of the time with the introduction, you will find definitions in the introduction most of the time. So people will quote how people define literature. So what is literature? So introduction, you should see what literature is, and then you should also find out why literature review of literature is even relevant. Why are you reviewing literature? If it's not necessary, why should you review it at all? And then sometimes you also find the sources where you retrieve your data from, right? So the search, the sources that you retrieve the information. And then also sometimes you also find the keywords, right, that the researcher use in the introduction of the literature review. And then finally, some people will go ahead to talk about the fact that the literature is organized under the various objectives, which are, then the person will list them. So make sure before you start your literature review, you always give an introduction. If you are publishing, that is different. These things are not needed. But because it's your thesis, you have to make sure you give an introduction, and then you have to make sure these components are there. So let's look at this topic. The topic is perspectives of mothers on quality of community-based management of acute malnutrition services in the Ganwes municipality, right? So this is someone's topic. You have the slide so you can follow, right? So this is someone's topic, perspectives of mothers on quality of community-based management of acute malnutrition, right? So let's look at the introduction of the person. He said that literature review focused on establishing what has been done in the area under the study. So as we established the last time, that literature review is the review of related studies in your area, right? Databases used in obtaining the information for the review included Science Direct, PubMed, Sage, Google Scholar, right? So the person went ahead, in the introduction, the person went ahead to list the various sources where he or she retrieved the information from. And then he went ahead to talk about the keywords. So keywords used for the search included perspectives of mothers, malnutrition, community-based management. So he listed the various keywords that he used in search of information for writing his or her literature, right? And then he went ahead to say that the literature review was organized around the following themes, most of which were consistent with the construct of the model, right? So he was using a theory. It's not compulsory for you to use a theory at this time or a theoretical framework at this time. right? So I will not really emphasize on that. So he went ahead to say that the literature review was organized around the following themes, most of which were consistent with the construct of the model, which are the severe acute malnutrition, community-based management of acute malnutrition, quality of care, mother's perception of acute malnutrition, etc. Right? So you can, if you assess this introduction well, you can find that with the introduction, there is a definition of literature review in the introduction. The person went ahead to list the various sources where he or she retrieved the information from, and then he went on to talk about the keywords that he used in search of the information, and then how the literature has been organized, right? So you should always give an introduction to your literature review. Let's look at this topic and then look at his introduction and compare with the first one that we talked about, right? So the topic is drivers of maternal food choices for children under 5 years in the Akuapem North District in the eastern region of Ghana, right? So that is the topic. Let's look at the person's introduction, and this is what has been accepted by a supervisor, and then it is online. You can find it online. So let's look at the introduction, and then let's compare with the first introduction, and then let's critique it. Okay, so the introduction is, this chapter deals with relevant literature that were reviewed on the study area. The literature review covers malnutrition in children under 5 years, feeding practices among children under 5 years, and then factors that influence food choices. Let me go over again. Introduction of the topic that I just read. This chapter deals with relevant literature that were reviewed on the study area. The literature review covers malnutrition in children under 5 years, feeding practices among children under 5 years, and factors that influence food choice, right? So this is the introduction of another person. So comparing this with the first one that we read, we can see that this person have omitted several aspects of the things that we talked about. So we can find the search engines in the introduction, and then the keywords are also missing, right? So there are several aspects that are missing in this introduction. So you have to make sure you write your introduction well, talking about what literature review is, why are you even reviewing the literature, where did you get your information to write the literature, and then what are the keywords that you use, and then you can go ahead to talk about how you organize the literature review in your introduction. Again, how do you organize your literature review? How do you organize your literature review?